Yuji's been popping off pretty recently in the JJK manga, and he seems to be keeping up with top tiers like Yuta in combat in certain areas. A lot of new powers of his have also been shown, like RCT and his soul shaking punches. With his recent achievements, it's only right people start to compare him to others. Today we're going to be comparing him to a hero we know and love, Deku from My Hero Academia. Though they have different mentalities, they have certain similarities in that they want to save others, and that's a quality that makes them very admirable. Now, I've already covered Deku before in things like the Akatsuki versus Deku and Deku versus Boruto, so I'll cover the newcomer Yuji first. In the beginning of JJK, Yuji has speed feats even in the first chapter, like being stated to run 50 meters in 3 seconds and outpacing Megami. And for those who read My Hero, you might remember that Ida performs a similar feat very early on, but this feat is nothing later on, as they both get faster. As early as Goodwill and Shibuya, Yuji has Calcs putting him at sound speeds or higher. For starters, there's the infamous Maki catching a bullet. Now, this is extremely contentious because later Maki is blitzed by someone who is Mach 3. Now, some argue Calcs are overstatements, but this is entirely disingenuous and has zero basis. Some others bring up the statement where Gege questions how they went from infinite speed to Mach speed. It's kind of just grasping at straws, as Gege in this statement never makes anything clear regarding how they feel, and if anything, they could also mean that they never understood where infinite came from in the first place. If you still take the bullet calc, it can get early Yuji to Mach 1, as well as other things like piercing blood. Now, this does not mean that Yuji caps at Mach 1 at all, since it would assume that he'd always be below Naoya. In recent chapters of JJK, he's been fighting with Yuta against Sukuna, and if you think he's on a level near Yuta or Maki, you can link him to a stronger Maki who beat Naoya, since he's able to keep pace with Maki, who shouldn't be holding back in their fight versus 10% Maguna. As well as if you think Yuta is on the level of 15 finger Sukuna, then there's a calc for Sukuna in Shibuya that's between Mach 50 and Mach 250. In current chapters, Yuta is fighting Sukuna, who's probably weaker than 15 fingers, but if you think otherwise, then there's more hypersonic scaling for him. You can also link him to a Hikari who partially dodged lightning. Now, I'm not saying he's above Yuta or equal to him, but just close enough to scale crossverse. And depending on how close you think he is to Yuta or Maki, you can also scale him to Kenjaku, who dodges piercing blood, putting him at Mach 19, as well as a possible relativistic feat from reacting to a black hole. Now, this black hole reaction is very contentious though, because it's outright stated that Yuki was suppressing it with her will, and Tengen was suppressing it with his barrier. We don't know how the suppression would work on the speed, but it means it's possibly weakened. Also, we know high-level sorcerers can predict techniques based on the buildup of CE, and they can react to it accordingly. So it's possible Kenjaku started using anti-gravity before it was even fully formed. It's a very contentious feat with a lot of factors, but if you want to grant it, you can get Yuji all the way to relativistic or light speed. So on the low ends we have speed of sound, or Mach 1, with mid to high end speeds at hypersonic to relativistic or even light speed. Now on to AP. For Yuji's AP, he has a lot more routes to go. Pretty early on he can be linked to Mekamaru, who has town or city block level calcs, depending on the person calcing it, as well as Hanami, who has similar calcs based on plant creation, and this is pretty low end. However, if you're the type that believes creation energy equals destruction energy, then you can raise him up a bit more to people like Dagon or Jogo, and he becomes a lot stronger using calcs of their domains being island or mountain level, and also considering within these domains we see islands, mountains, and even volcanoes. Now, this would assume that his punches scale well above their domains or to them, and their domains should scale above all their attacks, so saying that these punches scale there is pretty brave to say the least. Other winks involve a 4D curse spirit, but the scan just details that the curse is a door between places, so destroying the curse is not destroying the contained space, since the items still exist there and they don't fall out after the curse is destroyed. Now, of course, the Dagon and Jogo scaling depends on how strong you think Hanami is compared to the other disaster curses. Some people can argue a 2.5 times increase from Black Flash makes them more comparable in this sense, but that depends on where you scale his actual punches. There are durability negation arguments, since he can attack the soul, and some characters can't guard their souls at all. All things considered, Yuji's low end would be around city block to town level, and for the high end it would be around mountain to island levels, depending on how you decide to argue it. Now we're on to Deku. I've covered Deku's speed more than a few times, so I'll try to get through it without repeating too much of the same thing. If you'd like a more in-depth understanding about Deku's speed scaling, check out my light speed breakdown for My Hero Academia, it's pretty informative. For Deku's low-end speed, using Lady Nagant's bullet dodging feats that are calced at sub-relativistic, this gets Deku pretty high above Yuji already at just 45% of One For All, or if you want to go even further, you can add in the false 100% when he applies Fajin to it to make him even faster. There's also laser catching feats from Star and Stripe, and taking this into account can put Deku from relativistic to FTL. When you consider Shigaraki and Deku are stated to have surpassed an All Might that Star herself says she cannot scale to, and 45% plus Fajin is said to be what All Might should be able to accomplish with his own speed, this gets Deku in those ranges pretty comfortably. Also, a weaker Shigaraki scales to Star and Stripe at that time, but he then gets stronger mid-fight, and Deku is able to blitz a stronger Shigaraki before using 120%, and then again with gear shift added, indicating that he's faster than the false 100% used versus Nagant. He also can use gear shift to increase his own speed while ignoring inertia, but also increase or decrease his opponent's speed using gear shift, potentially using this to cause more damage after a hit, or even slowing down an opponent to put them under his speed level. So on the low end, you can place some at relativistic to light speed, and on the higher ends, you can put them at FTL to FTL+, which is blitzing Yuji, but maybe Yuji can beat him in AP, let's find out. Deku's AP is still seemingly unknown or misunderstood by many people. Lots of people just assume that he's still city block level when a weakened and suppressed All Might can casually punch and affect an entire city. And as mentioned earlier, it's stated and shown that he surpasses All Might later on. He actually has a few metas I talk about in my Akatsuki video in more depth, and we can also take from All Might's fight with USJ Nomu, and the 300 punches he threw at Nomu have calcs that put All Might at country level comfortably. This is considering All Might being stated to be weakening so fast he can't even maintain his buff form for more than a minute, and also having sustained damage to his wound, but pushing past those limits and going plus ultra to do this here. Now this would already be an impressive feat, but All Might then goes on to state that in his prime, he would have been able to do this with just 5 punches, granting that at bare minimum, prime All Might should be 60 times stronger. Deku currently does scale above this post-prime or weakened All Might, as he has statements putting him on and above prime All Might level, even by comparison to Shigaraki who has similar statements. Deku being 60 times above country level will put him in a whole new tier. And we know this should be consistent considering characters like Star and Stripe doing large island to continental feats, with statements putting a prime All Might over this. Deku has numerous other routes and calcs for his earlier self, putting him from mountain to island with possible multi-continental scaling later on. With all this said, however, how would the fight go down? Let's talk about it. Yuji and Deku have similar boxer-like fighting styles, but Deku has more abilities like Fajin or Black Whip that can increase his movement and punching and kicking power, while Yuji only has punches and kicks for the most part. Both have an analytical mind, being able to showcase high battle IQ feats. Deku in character, however, is more able to break down abilities and fighting styles on the fly, while Yuji in character fights with his environment and more adapts to his teammates or opponents very quickly. Yuji can take a beating, and no amount of pain shown in JJK will stop him in his tracks. And topped with RCT, he's a walking tank, being able to fight as if he's at 100%, even while being beaten and injured. Deku, with the power he has, however, can likely just knock him unconscious with a tap to his skull, and while not in character, can just outright kill him to end this, because if he doesn't one-shot Yuji, then he'll likely keep trying to fight him. Yuji can shake and harm the soul, so a blow from him is pretty deadly. But for Deku, Deku has the vestiges of One For All, and should be aware of his soul. Even if Yuji's punches manage to separate vestiges from Deku, we know from statements Deku's stats don't decrease, so he would likely be able to pull off the same stunts and beating up Yuji the same way. Deku can also lessen Yuji's speed and speed himself up to pummel him repeatedly or just to dodge attacks. He probably won't have to because his raw speed puts him up high enough, but he can definitely do this if he wants to make the fight a lot easier. RCT is super helpful for him, but if you take too much damage, healing isn't really going to be an option in this case. Which for Yuji, we don't really know where he stacks up in that amount right now, and even if we assume, the amount of damage Deku could rack up still would be so much for him that he wouldn't be able to heal it all in one go. I should say this information is up to only 252, so the information could change later on if Yuji becomes some god tier character. Maybe I'll make a follow-up video later. Last but not least is the Black Flash, which is something we see Yuji use a few times, but it's not guaranteed. Yuji could hit one, but it'd be so rare and would be less likely to hit one while getting blitzed. And even if he could tag him, it likely wouldn't be enough of a multiplier to get him to Deku's level to do anything about it. This is the end of the video. If you enjoyed, leave a like, leave comments with suggestions on next videos, and peace out for now. Bye.